Mormon Stories Podcast is a production of the Open Stories Foundation. All donations to Mormon Stories are fully tax deductible and go directly towards keeping the podcast alive and towards building a community of support for Mormons like you.
Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way.
And maybe this may be the most sensitive thing we talk about. I don't know, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about, I read through some of the transcript of the case. It talked about some of the activities that would go on in the holding nights and the electrician group. Yeah. Talk about some of that just as a way for us to get a sense for what these groups
Can we just watch it?
I've been trying to do. Is it time?
It's a good lead.
Okay, all right. So we'll start with the video, and then you can answer the question.
Okay, so this right here, is a video excerpt from deposition of the trial. And this is one of the counselors from the Journey Beyond program in his own words. And this is why I think this is important, so that it's coming from someone who leads these programs as opposed to coming through the filter of this angry gay activist. But he's telling what goes on during the advanced retreat that's called Journey Beyond. So Journey to Manhood is kind of the first round recruiting and induction retreat. And as a participant of Journey to Manhood, you don't know what happens on Journey Beyond. You just know that everybody has these really intense, secretive experiences on the weekend. And so, it piques your curiosity. And here for the first time, someone from the program is describing what happens on this retreat in the woods.
There's a process that's like a rebirthing, where you are kind of born and you experience being kind of held in sort of like a nursery and feeling kind of that warmth, nurturing environment.
Is the subject naked when he's reborn?
Yes.
Is there baby powder as
Yes.
part of that?
They're placed on a mattress, blindfolded, just so that they don't know where they're going and what's about to happen. And then before they are placed, they're told to undress, and then they're led to this mattress, their own specific one. It's not a full mattress. There's many different individual mattresses, and they're covered up very tightly in a blanket to simulate the womb. And then there's music that talks about, and dialogue that explains there being a birth and what it feels like to now be a baby and nurtured, and you hear music accommodating that, and then men come and kind of nurture these new babies in a very affirming and loving sort of way. Kind of wipe water on their face and kind of clean them up, and it feels very real. What happens after the rebirth is there's a call to kind of leave the mother womb and experience what it's like to kind of go out and be crazy in the outside world and be like a boy.
And at what point do the participants put their clothes back on?
Much later. There's a archetypical, I'm not sure how to say that word, I'm sorry. There's an archetype father. A man representing a kind of crazy fun father who bursts into the nursery and says come on boys, let's have some fun together. And then they're called out to this field where there's just so much fun, boyish things to do with each other. There's music and dancing, and there's a fire. There's fireworks. There's throwing, there's a water slide, and it's literally such a fun boy atmosphere where men are just having a lot of fun together, experiencing their wild side.
And during all this course, the participants are still naked, but not the other individuals.
By the time the wild party comes along, everyone kind of joins the celebration unclothed. After the wild party, they're led to the showers to clean up after all the cake that was flung around and mud and just all the carefreeness. They're woken up by the archetype boy, who starts to play fun games with them, kind of like when boys wake up and they like want to go crazy already. And there's like fun music, and they play games, and then they have like kid cereal for breakfast, like tricks and all these sugary stuff. And there's like a frog hunt where they're paired up with like a buddy, and they like look for a real frog, and it's just kind of like this cute way to start the day, just to remind everyone that they're still in like a boyish energy right now. There's sort of like this adolescence where men are kind of put into a room and asked to really like kind of evaluate their bodies, body imaging, and kind of feel their bodies kind of change and transform, just like puberty when the body does do exactly that. There's fun music that kind of facilitates this more kind of budding up of masculine energy, and it's kind of like a dance, and there's like movement, and people are blindfolded, and then I think the blindfolds are taken off, and everyone is together and sees each other again, undressed, and there's this feeling of camaraderie and unity, but now in a place of more mature manhood as opposed to boyish manhood. They might touch themselves, sure, because they're feeling that masculine energy in their body. There's like a impromptu like skinny dipping into a pool, where everyone jumps in and like kind of takes out their clothes and still kind of remain as boys, which that's what boys do. They have fun together. They, again, not really care about all these kind of boundaries that they put on themselves via clothing, but just sort of be fun and carefree and jump into a lake or jump into a pool, and it's a really fun environment, really fun atmosphere. Day 3 begins as a man processing different wounds without women there being present yet, but wounds around femininity. So this process regarding the anima allows a man to kind of to tap into that feminine energy, which is a little like more flowing, more creative, and there's kind of very beautiful music that's played, and men can sort of sway to it or dance to it and get in touch with it.
What's the experiential aspect?
Men are blindfolded and given a very soft, silky cloth that to me just felt very feminine, and like kind of like silky hair, at least for me. And there's somewhat of a dancing with it and kind of moving it and to the music, and it's like really interestingly it's really interestingly cool.
How would they interact with the cloth?
Holding it and moving it and kind of dancing with it. I think I even laid down with the cloth and kind of imagined having a woman with me, kind of dancing with me and like by my side. It really helped me get in touch with the love that I can and now really experience toward women.
What happened after that process?
I believe that after that process, they're taken to an open space in woods, and they allow themselves to get in touch with the lover energy during that process. Men are blindfolded at the beginning and asked to take off their clothes. It's a new process. The idea being that men in that place can feel very at one with earth and the environment around them, because it's in the middle of woods. And the process helps men get really in touch with literally every sense that they're experiencing in the middle of the woods, whether it be the wind on their skin, taste. Men are given fruits and things to taste, and to really be in love or kind of use that lover energy to like appreciate my taste buds, or appreciate the feeling of my skin and how it reacts to the environment, or appreciate like my feet touching the ground. And
what happens next?
Men are asked individually after the dinner, like they're kind of just chilling and relaxing, and the staff member kind of all disappear, and the men don't really quite know why. They just, I think, assume that something's that they're just setting up another process. But a staff member kind of collects a man individually and takes them outside of the dining room and blindfolds them and takes them to a lodge where there's a woman inside, a really beautiful, like well-dressed woman who men are not expecting to be there. And then they're asked to take off their blindfold and to enter, and they're told that you're about to take a really big step on your work. And it's this point when you open the door that you realize, like, life isn't about just getting to my prime masculine state. It's, oh my gosh, there's actually feminine in my world. And then you see her, and you're already very masculine and like charged because of all the work.
As I think about that, as I watch that, it is kind of shocking to me, and the mental health professional in me is kind of screaming because, we can talk about that later, but I also, just to go back a little bit to that temple analogy, I'm going to guess, if we're trying to be respectful here, that for those who have been through that experience and found value in it, that's perceived as a very sacred thing to them. So I just want to acknowledge that, because that's my guess from having watched it, never having spoken to anyone who's actually been through it. So I guess I want to find a way to talk about this with that in mind, that to some people that's probably really a special thing, sacred. And
sex is a special thing.
No, I'm not trying to, I'm just saying, that's just a reaction I have. I think one reaction will likely be that was edited in a way that left out important things, that somehow the editing job of that was, somehow biased.
As opposed to those other contexts where nude cake fights are totally understandable.
That's, I'm just saying.
And I would add that was a 4-hour deposition that we watched in court. The trial transcripts are very available.
Yeah.
So
let's just as like an experiment here to drive the point home. Like, if you identify as a straight man, sorry ladies, if you identify as a straight man, just stand up on your feet. Don't be ashamed. Okay. If you've ever been with guys and it spontaneously erupted into taking your clothes off and showering each other, please remain standing. Jeff. Well, you've been to Burning Man. That's not fair.
So you're saying those aren't masculine behaviors?
One of the things that you hear repeatedly in these testimonies is, like guys do. Like guys do. Because guys do this. And it's like, guys don't do this unless they're radical fairies.
Okay, so tell me, let's just hit it. Tell me what you think is wrong with what we just saw. What are the ways in which you... No, let's be explicit. I know it should be self-evident, but be respectful and scientific, or bring your humanity to it. But what's wrong with it? What are the categories for you that are wrong about what we just saw?
Number one, the secrecy is a huge problem. That you end up believing so deeply that these are the programs that are going to deliver me and put me on the path where I'm sexually oriented toward women and can fulfill the measure of my creation as I understand it. And then, behind the curtain, if this is what it takes to be straight, what the hell does it take to be gay? Like, it kind of pushes me to the point where I lose words, because it's so inconceivable that these practices are being seriously commercially marketed with success rates that are completely unverifiable as being able to change and influence sexual orientation from gay toward straight. It is unconscionable.
So people would pay, what, $500, $800 to go to this, thinking that there was a what probability that they would what?
The statistics that were advertised to me were 60% success rates in overcoming unwanted same-sex attractions. Other plaintiffs in the case were advertised 85% success rates in overcoming same-sex attractions.
And do you think that led them to believe that the same-sex attraction would go away or just become manageable?
Yep, that it was advertised as going from gay to straight that you would be able to reorient and find attractions to women. It's not, here's how you can come and learn a new vocabulary to very strategically remain in a state of self-denial. Like, that's not what was advertised. It wasn't, people can change the labels that they use for their same base feelings. Like, that's not what the program advertises. But then at the end of the day, that's the bait and switch that is used to try and evade the blatantly obvious violations of consumer fraud.
So you don't like this because, number one, you don't feel like it represents male behavior. Number two, you feel like it's falsely advertised and that consumer fraud's happening because people are paying for something that they feel, that you feel, doesn't deliver for them in the way that they were led to believe. That's
right. And I want to like push back a little bit because I respect that, you're asking me questions about what I feel, but these are facts. These are facts that were found in a court of law by a unanimous jury vote, 7-0, a jury of peers, that making representations that these types of practices can convert you toward heterosexuality are fraudulent on their face. Saying that you have a license in psychotherapy when in fact you do not is fraudulent on its face. Offering statistics and giving commercial advertisements based on those statistics when there's no basis that held up in court at all is fraudulent on its face. This isn't just what does Michael Ferguson feel. This is what has now been weighed by the judicial process and found to be lacking in integrity.
Talk about the groupings of witnesses in the trial and what the main findings were in terms of their testimony as expert witnesses.
Sure. So just to paraphrase, and again, as Seth said, all of this is fully available online, that there's complete transparency in the proceedings of the trial, and that you can read the documentation if at any way you think that we're shading or distorting.
And we'll link to the video, context. We'll link to the transcripts on mormonstories.org. But go ahead.
Sure. So one of the expert witnesses is a world-class sociologist, social psychologist, and she studies cult dynamics. She studied numerous cults, child abuse cults, sex cults, religious cults, and she outlined very clearly and succinctly the principles that are very classically involved in cult formation and maintenance and how they map on directly to these programs. The secrecy, the coercive influence. How many times did you hear him talk about blindfolding? The nudity, the high arousal techniques. All of these are patterns when people know that they need to be living this thickly veiled and hidden life with its own special rituals, vocabulary, words, and practices to indicate who's an insider.
So one testified about cult-like similarities.
Right.
Another
witnesses. Expert witness was the former president of the American Psychiatric Association, and she's one of the ones who oversaw the creation of the DSM-5. And the DSM-5 is the Bible. It's a diagnostic and statistical manual. It's the 5th edition. It is what psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical practitioners use as their guide set of criteria in diagnosing and treating. She testified a lot of different things, one of them being that the ethics violations are just off the charts. That there's no case in which secrecy and withholding information about a psychotherapeutic process in any way increases the success of the outcomes, that there's no justification for not having fully informed consent for someone who is going through some kind of treatment. Another thing that she testified about is the unconscionability of having nudity in a clinical setting. If you're someone who is posturing as a mental health provider and you're having clients disrobe or disrobing with them, that there is no situation in which that is an ethical or a conscionable practice. I mean, she basically eviscerated every possible defense to justify the legitimacy of the practices that were under scrutiny.
Okay. What about the empirical support for these practices?
So we keep in mind that we filed this lawsuit 2.5 years ago. The defense has had 2.5 years to find success witnesses. And the best that they found were men who still engage in frequent nudity, in constant holding, in these high emotional relationships with other men, and who on the stand, every one of these supposed success stories testified under oath that they still experience same-sex attractions. It got to the point where the judge finally said to the defense, frankly, nobody who you have presented has been a success story unless you have somebody who is presenting information that is relevant to the claims of the defense and is a success story. You're wasting the court's time right now.
And talk about the evangelical group and the founder. You were going to get into this very early on. What's the name of the evangelical reparative therapy group?
Exodus.
Talk about Exodus International, what their founder or president ultimately admitted.
Right.
After years, we're talking about decades, since the 1970s. Of what?
Of pushing the storyline that change efforts are the legitimate response, to homosexuality, is that they finally admitted a couple of years ago that they had been very misguided, that change efforts are ineffective and in many cases harmful, and that that's an inappropriate path to take if someone is experiencing distress around the intersections of sexuality and faith.
Wasn't it some crazy statistic, like 99% of those who had been through the program, it didn't work for them? Wasn't it something crazy like that?
I don't recall that specific statistic,
we could look it
there
up.
was a lot of discussion.
Yeah. This is the president of an ex-gay reparative therapy group admitting that after decades of leading people through reparative therapy that people really didn't change. And so that's another confirmation of what, was found by the judge in your case.
Yeah.
So, so how does this tie to Mormonism? Because that's not, North Star, that's not evergreen.
Right.
So how does this, or these practices, make their way into the lives of Mormons?
Two of the, again, success stories with very bolded scare quotes who were put forward by the defense are individuals, one who used to be on the board of directors for Evergreen before it was dissolved, and one who is currently in the leadership of North Star. But I'm very sensitive about being accused of exaggerating or embellishing or taking out of context. And so I have the actual notes from their testimonies under oath that are their words. If that's okay to read a little bit of it, do you want to do that now?
I think it should be accurate. So how does this infiltrate Mormonism in a way to where we would even care?
And again, it's been a couple of years since I've been directly involved in North Star, and so I can't speak as directly about present day situations. When I was involved in it, one of the projects that we were doing was to reach out to bishops at BYU and to target and to recruit students at Brigham Young University who were experiencing distress at the intersections of faith and sexuality, and start pushing them toward journey into manhood and getting them on the path of these, increasingly secretive retreats. And so a lot of it comes per recommendation of LDS bishops. Again, the degree to which you can break down percents of referrals that come from the church versus word of mouth, that is a whole dicey conversation.
But it's safe to say that LDS bishops and LDS social services, LDS family services, over the years have routinely referred their LGBT clients to Journey into Manhood and other sorts of similar activities of what we just saw here.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
So let's go ahead and jump into this. This is from, again, it's one of those things that if it weren't the testimony in a trial under oath from their own mouths, I don't know that I would even believe it, because it's so radical and extreme. This is the testimony of a man named Preston Dahlgren. He was one of the individuals who was featured on the national television show on TLC entitled My Husband's Not Gay. Do you want to do this back and forth, or how do you want to?
Going back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do a question.
You do. So Seth is going to be the attorney, and I'm going to be Brett.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question, did you participate in any processes that involve nudity?
And this is in reference to the journey into manhood, so the first retreat. Yes, I did.
Question, can you just very briefly describe that process for the jury, please?
Yeah, so this man ultimately asked to be rebaptized, to be cleansed. So there was a local river, and we went and held a baptism for him. He was a very religious man. And so here he's describing this nude ritual rebaptism process that they participated in on the Journey to Manhood retreat. And
So this is a Mormon, maybe even an active Mormon,
Yep.
engaging in naked baptism rituals as part of Journey to Manhood.
Right, and so again, let's put this into the context of like the normal lived experience, where imagine that you had a missionary who said to his mission president, we did a rebaptism that was unauthorized on this inactive member, and we did it naked. Like, whoa. The mission president would be like, probably filtering a lot of expletives and surprise and shock, but there would be consequences for that. Whereas, in large part because of the secrecy, that these organizations have been able to do all kinds of things without any scrutiny, without any accountability to them. And again, it just perpetuates.
As far as we know.
As far as we know, as far as it's publicly visible, but it perpetuates the false narrative within a culture that is searching for answers and hungry for information and truth. That here are things that you can do in order to fit into the box that your culture is pushing onto you. So, I want to read this next one. This is continuing from Preston's testimony.
Sure. Question. I want to return to the very first time you staffed Journey into Manhood. Oh, sorry. One of the people that staffed that weekend was a man named Jonathan Hoffman, right?
And this is the same Jonathan Hoffman that we just saw in the video.
And the first time you met him was at Journey into Manhood, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And he experienced same-sex attraction himself, right?
Yes, I assume so.
And you were physically attracted to Jonathan when you first met, right?
Yes, I thought he was an attractive man.
After you met on that weekend, you spent time with him, right?
Yes, I did.
For example, on one occasion, you and 4 other men gave Jonathan a massage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan took his shirt off for this massage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jonathan who initiated that shirtless massage that you and 4 other men gave him, right?
I can't answer that. I don't remember who initiated it.
Do you remember testifying at your deposition that the way the massage came about was because Jonathan wanted a massage?
He had asked for it.
So you have also engaged in holding with Jonathan, right?
Yes, I have.
On multiple occasions?
Yeah, a couple.
Including privately at your house?
Yes.
And one of the ways you hold each other is in each other's arms, facing each other, like a hug.
Like a hug.
I believe the way you described it was, quote, I remember leaning against the couch and he lay down next to me, and it was my arms around him and his arms around me, like a chest to chest.
Yes, okay, I do remember that.
Okay, and sometimes you'd play soft music during these holding sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And they could last as long as half an hour or an hour, right?
Yeah, generally it's not holding the entire time. There's also talking and conversing.
So half an hour to an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Stopping this? I'll keep going?
I think that's
okay.
The main gist of it.
Okay.
But again, it's this thing where it's like this is the doublespeak and double standard that's being perpetuated. I mean, 2 men holding each other on a couch, chest to chest, listening to soft music, talking and conversing.
But
That's gay. I'm sorry.
I'm not in any way an expert on this, but my understanding is that there's theory behind it from their perspective, which is, basic behaviorism and habituation. That if there's some sort of attraction or experiences that you're feeling, if you expose yourself to those feelings sufficiently, that over time their impact, their strength. It's kind of like being married when you're heterosexual, right? Over time, the strength, or when you're same-sex married, the strength of the feelings ultimately decrease. And so the idea is, let's just do this until it's no longer arousing for us and no longer a problem, and then we'll be cured, we'll be better.
And BYU bishops are totally cool with that. When members of the ward are like, yeah, we were just cuddling and spooning and soaking as much as we could so that we overcame our attraction. It's like, that's not how this works.
Well, okay, but what if for them it does?
Then they should have testified to that in court.
But what did they testify?
They testified that they're still primarily attracted to men, and that they have to have these exercises on a recurring basis in order to sustain the lifestyle that they've chosen.
Do you understand, is it your understanding that married men engage in these activities too?
You mean like extramarital emotional?
Yeah, like a gay man is married to a woman, but he engages in the holding exercises while he's married.
Yeah, that's what is starting to.
So it's not just single gay men; it's married,
correct,
heterosexually married gay men.
Men who are living a heteronormative, visible life in their community, and then invisibly participating in exercises like this.
And is it your understanding that the wives know that this is going on or not? Is it kept from them?
I don't know the degree to which there's transparency.
Okay. So I have to stop and just say that there's a part of me that feels like this whole conversation is sort of exploitative. It's kind of like, let's shame these people who are trying their best to work through a very tough situation, and let's like expose it and shame it and make fun of it. And there's a part of me that feels uncomfortable about that might be how it's received. I know that's not my intent. I don't want to try and judge your intent. I sense that you actually have lots of sincere intent aside from that. But what would your reaction be to that concern? Just this event tonight, showing the video, reading the transcript, is a very shaming.
How is it shaming as opposed to truth telling?
I don't know. I'm just saying that occurs to me. What do you think?
I think that for a long time, reparative therapy and conversion therapy has been able to operate in the shadows, and that as a result of that, a lot of practices that in the court of law were found to violate basic tenets of social integrity, including these practices, again, that were found guilty of multiple counts of consumer fraud. That it's part of bringing to light and educating, especially for people who are in these vulnerable, precarious situations where they're trying to make a life decision based on promises of hope that are being offered to them. It's so critically important that if there's going to be this portrait painted and shoved so heavy-handedly into a culture as the norm and as the standard, that it's only fair for a full exposition of facts and considerations to be on the table.
We haven't spent much time talking about the perceived harm of the individuals who have engaged in these types of behaviors. Now, obviously, there will be people who are able to say, I went through this, it really helped me, I really benefited. I mean, you could almost find that for anything. You could find it for crystals, you can find it for, tarot card reading, like lots of different things people will say it was really beneficial. But there are going to be people who say it is beneficial. We'll stipulate that right now, and we've invited them to come on and talk about it. I hope they will.
Here's the thing, is that let's reground this in facts, that we're in America, and grown men can go into the woods and do whatever kind of kinky stuff they want to do. We're not restricting the rights to do that. What you cannot do is falsely advertise, say that you have some kind of clinical license or therapeutic credential when you don't. You cannot say that you have success rates and statistics that are completely unfounded, fabricated, that don't hold up under any sort of scrutiny, and then advertise this as a commercial product. That is where it violates from being illogical to being illegal.
And I guess the only other, now I'm switching back to kind of, my role is having researched this for 3 or 4 years as part of my dissertation. Dr. Bradshaw and I and Renee Gallagher and some others, we did survey 1,612 current or former Mormons who have experienced same-sex attraction. A little over 1,000 of those reported engaging in sexual orientation change efforts. So about 2/3 attempted to change their sexual orientation, according to our study. For men, on average, I'm going to say they tried at least 3 different methods for a duration of about 10 years. On average, they attempted to try and change their sexual orientation. And we asked them very specifically, to what extent did you experience these efforts as being, beneficial or effective versus harmful? We worked really hard to get as a diverse sample as we could. We worked really hard to reach out to members of Evergreen, of North Star, and then we recruited through the newspapers primarily, over 100 newspapers worldwide. So what you can't claim, in Exodus International and others, JONAH and Evergreen were guilty of this. They would conduct these surveys in the 80s and 90s where they would survey participants in their program, and only ones that maybe they were in touch with. And so you could really argue that those samples were just not in any way diverse. And there's a whole history behind that. But we sincerely worked as hard as we could to get the biggest sample that we could from the most fair, representative sort of bodies that we could. Again, like 1/3 or more came from just newspapers alone. But then we went to every single group, not just affirmation and groups that would sort of be aligned with our ideology, but we went to Evergreen, we went to North Star, and everyone in between, not holding any punches, making extra efforts to reach out to North Star and Evergreen, actually, so that it's like, bring your participants, let them come in our study, we want them all. And of the 1,000 plus that engaged in sexual orientation change efforts, 0% reported that through their sexual orientation change efforts, that their same-sex attraction was eliminated. That's 0%. So a full 1/3 of our sample were active in the church at the time that they participated in the survey. So you can't just argue that our survey was only, ex-Mormons and angry post-Mormons. A full 1/3 were active in the church. And even with that sizable of a group, 0% reported that through sexual orientation change efforts, their same-sex attraction was eliminated.
And if I can just back you up on that a little bit with regard to statistical power, which I feel like I can talk about now. I just defended my dissertation successfully this week, so I feel like I can say a thing or two about a thing or two. But, Jeff, who was here earlier, and there he is in the back, but we've talked about this before, that there are political polls that are made for nationwide demographic assessments based on 500 people. And we're talking about calling elections within percentage points. So once you get to that large of a sample size, you have tremendous predictive power for populations that are, 250 to 300 million, talking about the whole United States. Ergo, that is completely a valid sample size to begin to extrapolate for a population like 11 million, 13 million members that you have in the LDS Church. The statistics are in your favor.
Yeah, and it's not a random sample, so that's fair. But I get really frustrated at attempts to discredit our study because, there's been no study like it ever in the history of the social sciences in terms of the size of it and the sincere attempts at getting a diverse sample. The biggest second study that I could find had about 200 participants, and this is in decades of social science research trying to study sexual orientation change efforts. Most of them around 50 to 100. It's always like participants in Exodus or participants in Evergreen. No one's ever broken 200, and we had 1,600. And again, advertising through newspapers. So I would love it if people who attacked our study would acknowledge that and give the study its fair due and credit that it deserves. The results have been published in the Journal of Counseling Psychology, which is an APA-accredited journal, and probably by this point, 6 or 7 other peer-reviewed scientific journals. All of these articles have come from this single data set, and it's legitimate, although it's not perfect, but I think it deserves more respect than some are giving it. And to finish, so 0% reported an elimination of their same-sex attraction. 3.6%, as my memory recalls, reported some change in their sexual attraction. So that would be, some slight increase in their other sex attraction or some decrease in their same-sex attraction. So about 4% said, yeah, I did experience some movement in my sexual orientation or sexual orientation. That's 4%, right? On the other hand, 40%, that's 10 times the amount, reported harm from engaging in sexual orientation change efforts. So you're talking about people who are 10 times more likely to report experiencing harm from religious attempts, group attempts, psychotherapy attempts, 10 times more likely to report having experienced harm than any benefit. And you're saying, well, that's 60% that didn't report harm. Well, even if you don't report harm, you spent 10, 12 years of your life paying therapists, paying people for retreats, going through these experiences, trying to date women, praying to Heavenly Father above, fasting such that you're 30 or 35, maybe you married a woman along the way, maybe you even have children, and you're in your 30s now, 40s, sometimes 50s. You've sort of spent a good portion of your good years, and you're saying no effect.
Well, and this actually touches
at best, but at worst, harm. Right?
And this,
sorry, that's my soapbox. I'm going to go back to interviewer mode now.
It's a good soapbox. This gets to the point of one of the very pivotal realizations for me. And this is a principle that I believe very strongly in, and it was revealed to me, like to many other people here listening, in the LDS temple, where we're told that there is a pattern in life wherein the greatest joy is experienced when you fulfill the measure of your creation. And I had this epiphany that I had committed my time, talents, and energies to fighting the measure of my creation, and that was not the path delivering on the promises of joy. The way that Spirit works in my life is that being in harmony with the measure of my creation and operating from that point is when I experience my cup running over and I experience claiming the blessings of heaven in my own life. So there's my soapbox, mister.
Okay, so just to tie it back, the things we just saw in the video, the things we've been talking about in the transcript, these are the types of practices or like them that...
And there's more. This is the thing, is that there's so many and so frequently practiced exercises, secret retreats. This is one of the reasons why this was a 3.5-week trial. This was a very long process of, first of all, trying to cut through the insincerity that was being put onto the stand and the dishonesty, frankly, that was being put onto the stand by the defense. Probably for the interest of time, we're not going to go into it fully, but it is shocking. It is astonishing. The direct lies being told under oath that then were impeached. In other words, that were being proven on the stand to be false, and that testimonies reversed during the process of the trial. If someone at the beginning of their testimony starts by saying, no, I don't host nudity exercises in my house, and by the end of the testimony, after they've seen the documents and the emails where they're saying, this is the type of nudity stuff I do in my house, that they say, oh yeah, well, I think that sometimes we do this type of nudity stuff in my house. That it's like, it's especially frustrating that you can't even take them at their word, and that you have to pierce through all of the misrepresentations that are being brought to the conversation. It just exacerbates the feeling of stress that's intrinsic to this conversation.
Right. So this is the part that's most, difficult for me, because people's lives, we're talking about people's lives here. And in this case, Dean Bird, I'm gonna get personal here, but it's with an open invitation for candid discussion and people correcting us if we're wrong. But I just spent the past 5-6 years of my life as a therapist, in training to gay and lesbian Mormons. And I I've seen them go through these different programs, and I've been there to try and pick up the pieces as they were suicidal or whatever, or so disappointed. And so here's where for me the biggest questions come, because it could be we have it all wrong. It could be we've been totally misrepresenting things. But I mean, we did our best to be accurate. We're reading from court testimony. We're showing not video of people on sort of Michael's side, but actually people who represented the defendants in the case. So we're trying to be accurate. We're trying to be honest. We're trying to be open. But here's where the rubber meets the road with Mormonism, because, you know, it used to be Dean Byrd that was sort of viewed as the figurehead for sort of, even though he was behind the scenes, he would write the ensign articles. As I understand it, he would be in the committee meetings where the brethren would talk about same-sex attraction. He would be the consultant to the LDS Church as they were, you know, referring people to Evergreen and referring people to these programs. It used to be Dean Byrd. Dean Byrd passed away a few years ago. And, you know, who's the face of LGBT issues within Mormonism today? It's Ty Mansfield. And so, you know, he's worked for BYU, as I understand it. He got a book contract with Deseret Book called Voices of Hope. When a gay or lesbian Mormon, you know, goes to Deseret Book to get a book to try and help them, they get Ty's book. He and Danielle, and they're here tonight, and I really give them respect for coming tonight. I invite them to respond now or later. But when they, you know, they're on the cover of LDS Living magazine. They're holding conferences and retreats in Utah and throughout the world, and they're leading North Star. And so now, instead of Dean Byrd and Evergreen, it's Ty and Daniel Mansfield and Jeff Bennion and others and North Star. And these types of things we just saw with Journey into Manhood and the holding and the cuddling and all that stuff, apparently those are the types of things that a struggling young gay Mormon now is going to encounter when they participate in North Star or other types of activities. And so it's really confusing. How can the church support this? How can they let them be the face of, you know, LGBT Mormonism, active Mormonism, when these confusing things are going on? So for me, this isn't a hit job. This isn't like trying to attack. It's like a simple question. It's like, do we have the facts right? Is this misrepresentation? Is it true? If it's true, show us how it's helpful and be open and honest about it, and show us the empirical support and the scientific basis for this behavior. And explain the ethical concerns about how these things are condemned by all the major mental health associations, and the claims versus the reality, the money. Help us understand if we've got it wrong, and help us understand how in the world these sorts of activities can be reconciled with a faithful LDS law of chastity kind of paradigm. Now, I'm sincerely open. But I think it's fair that we talk openly about this, not with the intent of embarrassing or shaming or excoriating, but because lives are in the balance. Suicides happen. People get in marriages that then, you know, another finding from our study is that up to 70 to 80% of mixed orientation marriages result in divorce. Very, very low quality of life ratings in these marriages. Very high depression and low self-esteem. And it's even worse for those who are celibate. Super low quality of life reported ratings. These are active members reporting quality of life ratings lower than people who report having lupus, which is a really debilitating disease. You know, help us understand why the data show that these things aren't working and they're leading to, in many cases, depression and sadness and despair and divorce and even suicide. Help us understand why this is a good thing.
This is also, and it gets complex, where, okay, Mormonism is my religion of origin, and there's something very deep about your primary attachments. Whether you want them to or not, they always pull on you emotionally. And there's this protective element that I feel about the potential for Mormonism to be a force for good. And I see this as, once again, a place where the church is getting it so dead wrong that in the interest of protecting its potential to do good, I feel an urgency for this to be something that we resolve, that we have serious, difficult conversations about, and that we come to the table willing to have new, I'll say the word revelations and invoke that Mormon phraseology.
So anything else about the trial that you want to talk about before we kind of move on to healing and growth and other sorts of things? Do you feel like we kind of covered it, or?
The tip of the iceberg. There was, again, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation and information that came out. And a big part of the challenge in the aftermath of the trial is public education and awareness. How do you distill this down into the most important talking points, and what are those, and how can we communicate those most effectively?
I would just add, as a spouse, it was a very difficult process to watch. When Michael and I first met, and this discussion about this lawsuit came up, he very hesitantly he didn't want to do it. It was too much, and it was too much to think about. It was too much to relive, and he knew that if we did this, that part of his life would be public, that he would have to take the stand in front of a jury and a judge and lawyers. And he told me about some of the things that he had been through, and I remember feeling so sad that this sweet, gentle man had gone through these experiences. And there was a night around that same time, I don't even know if you remember this, but I was house sitting for a friend in Arizona. We got some takeout. We were sitting there. We were kind of talking about trial, the potential maybe being a part of this. And Michael turned away and he looked back at me and he had tears in his eyes. And then he started sobbing. And sorry, I started talking about it now, but we went and we laid down, and I didn't know what was wrong, and I didn't know how to talk to him. But he was just in this really traumatic state. And I just remember I held him and I said, "We'll be okay. This will be okay." So I thought about that day a lot, watching the trial, especially the days when he had to testify, because I knew that I couldn't be there to help protect him. And so as a spouse, that was it. I didn't go through conversion therapy, but this affects my life too. And it was intense.
Were you proud of him?
So proud of him. He's so smart. We go back and we read his deposition and just laugh.
It's hilarious.
It's really funny. Michael was 5 steps ahead of the defense attorney every time, and the questions that were asked are just ludicrous, some of them. And on the stand, Michael held his own very well. And Michael was the last witness for the plaintiffs before they rested. And so I had seen the defense attorney, crosshairs on the other witnesses that had been up there. And he was vicious and very cruel. And I feared that he would try to tear Michael to pieces. And it turned out to not be so awful, but it was still very intense. But I was incredibly proud of him for sharing his story, for being courageous. A lot of people that we meet who have gone through this come up and very timidly and shamefully will whisper, "I went through conversion therapy." And they're so embarrassed about it, and they don't want to talk about it, nor do they want to remember it, especially the older generation of men that I've met who went through electroshock therapy in the 70s and are still so traumatized by it. So I was very proud of him for being brave to take this on. And it's been, like you said, this was filed in November 2012. It's been a part of our life since then until a few weeks ago.
One of the things, too, for anybody who is listening, who feels a need to have, through professional licensed services, some of these issues of conversion therapy and of recovery from conversion therapy addressed in their own lives, we're working with the Pride Center to establish resources, a referral resource, a group recovery program. It's very, very in the beginning stages, but there's a website, teamtruth.org, where as we're building it out, people will be able to share their stories and to find validation that I'm not the only one who came through this on the other side and is still surveying the damage and trying to make sense out of it. I think that that's going to be an important component moving forward for a lot of people of the healing process.
All right. Well, Seth, let's give you the microphone for a second. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to be the first married couple in Utah.
That was also an exceptional day, totally unplanned. Michael and I, so the day was December 20th, 2013, also known as Shelby Friday. That was the judge who ruled in the case. And Michael and I had been engaged since the summer. We got engaged in Japan while we were working on a tea farm. It was very romantic and unforgettable. But in the interim, we had been talking about marriage plans. And the idea of being married in Utah was not on the top of the list. We knew that wasn't going to happen. We were talking about going to California, getting the paperwork, but knowing full well that we would come back to the state where we live and work, where it wouldn't be recognized. And then thinking about where would we do a reception, who would we invite, what would it look like, just, normal wedding plan stuff. And then on that day, December 20th, we got a call from our friend Paul Burke, who's an attorney here, who said, Judge Shelby ruled today. And we knew that Judge Shelby was going to rule soon. He had intimated that he was probably in January of 2014. So Michael and I actually had the marriage application printed and filled out by the door. And the plan was, well, when the decision comes down in January, we'll just quietly take this, go down to the courthouse, not tell anybody, and then in the summer we'll do a big reception and say, surprise, we got married in December or January, haha, how funny. But that day on the 20th, when Paul called and said, Judge Shelby ruled today, and we looked at each other and said, oh my God, are we getting married right now? Holy crap. And Paul said, we don't know if the state's gonna get a stay. You could have 5 minutes, you could have 5 hours, you could have 5 weeks. We really have no idea, but you need to go right now if you're serious about getting married. And so we hopped in the car, and I was in really frumpy jeans and my grandma's sweater, and I don't think my hair was combed. And Michael was in his purple hoodie. And we drove down State Street to 21st South to the county clerk building there, and we were at the light to turn left, and it was taking forever. And I was like, Michael, just get out, just run across the street, go get in line. And so we ran across lanes of traffic to get
I was
up
expecting there to be this huge line weaving outside the office and around the building.
We thought everybody knew and that everybody was there and that we needed to get there quick. And I was texting some of the plaintiffs in the case here. I was like, oh my God, did you hear? Are you coming down? What's going on? And we got there and flung open the doors and just silence. Nobody had heard a thing.
They hadn't even known. They hadn't even heard.
Nobody knew. And we went up and said, we're here to get married. And the woman there was really sweet, and she leaned forward and she's like, there's nothing more I want to do than do this for you. But the state forbids me. I'm really sorry. And I pulled out the email from Paul, and I said, no, look, the judge ruled today in the case, you can. And she gasped and said, I need to speak with somebody. Hang on. And then we just were pacing around frantically,
so cute,
nervously.
She kept saying, please don't go away. I so want to marry you. Please don't go away. I so want to marry you.
And we're sitting there feeling like just waiting, and we're texting everybody, and I'm live tweeting it. And I had like 1,000 Twitter followers. I didn't know anybody paid attention to Twitter. Like my tweet the night before was about some stupid pizza joke. Like it was so dumb. But I was tweeting, oh my God, the judge ruled today. We're at this office. We're getting married in Utah. And I was taking pictures of people in the office. People are really being great here. There's some people who are crying. We're like, oh my God. Then Sim Gill walked in. Sim Gill's the district attorney for Salt Lake, and he was flanked by like 5 people. And I thought, oh, game over. We've missed it. Like whatever he's here to tell everybody, it's over. We can't. And he came in, and he knew why we were there. He knew who we were. And he said, are you here to get married? And I said, yes, sir, we are. And he shook my hand and he said, well, congratulations. Hang on. I need to get everybody up to speed. Give me 20 minutes. We said, okay.
And he said, and I wouldn't lose your place in line.
And at this time, still nobody's there. And I'm still tweeting, oh my God, Sim Gill just got here. The DA's here. He's talking to people. Bob Henlon from Q Salt Lake showed up. He had seen my tweets. And Q Salt Lake is a local gay paper and magazine in Salt Lake. And he came in totally thinking we were BSing it, totally thinking this was just a scam, and we were freaking, psyching everybody out. So he came in, and he sees what's going on, and he's talking to people too, and he gets on the phone with Michael Aaron, the publisher, and he goes, no, this is really happening. And then 20 minutes later, the woman, her name's Wanny, she came out and said, I've been told we can proceed. And we had the form filled out, we paid her, and this is how little I knew about getting married. I thought it was like a driver's license that you fill out the form, you get your marriage license, and yeah, you're married. And she's like, no, who's going to marry you? And I said, I don't know. I didn't have time to think about that. Someone has to marry you. And she's like, well, I can do it. Everybody here can do that. I'll be happy to. And just at that precise moment, it was 3:00. One of the county clerk building has rooms where you can get married. And it had been reserved, but someone didn't show up, and all of a sudden this room became available. And we went in with everybody who was there in the office that day, complete strangers.
Yeah, everybody had, during those 20 minutes, realized what was happening and started tuning in with intense interest. And they said, is it okay if we come in and watch you guys get married?
We said, of course, like a wedding party is better than no wedding party, even though I don't know any of you. And we went into this room. Annie came in for a minute. We started filling out the forms, and she got called out. And I thought again, oh no, like it's too late. Like they just got word that she can't do this. She came back 2 minutes later, and I don't know why, but she said, I've been told that I cannot marry people today. I can only issue licenses. So unless somebody here is qualified to marry you, this is kind of the end of the road. And Bob Henlon from Q Salt Lake said, I can do it. I'm ordained in whatever church it was.
Yeah, he's an ordained minister.
And he said, I can do it. And we said, oh my God, do it. So very quick vows. We signed some papers. We said some things. There's a little video of it somewhere. And right when it ended, a knock came on the door. And in the video, Michael says, don't answer it, because we thought it was the state.
I thought it was going to be news from the governor's office that, like, the Death Star had landed.
And so we opened the door, and it was the news. It was Fox 13, Annie Cutler, and had seen my tweets too, and that was when the media started showing up. And we took a picture of us with the marriage license and the certificate, and I tweeted, me and my new husband, my polygamous great Mormon grandparents would be so proud. And I mean that. That wasn't just total snark. That was true. They fought for their right to live the life they wanted to be married free of intrusion. And they did at great cost to themselves. And I stand by that tweet. Rachel Maddow retweeted it that day, which was totally weird. And
he fangirled over that really
totally
hard.
Did. So that's what happened. And then we walked out, and it was just media everywhere. And then Michael's advisor, Jeff Anderson, and Carrie, his wife, came down, celebrated with us. They were in some of the pictures, and it was just this whirlwind it was just unbelievable. I still think about that day and don't know what exactly happened.
We walked around in a daze for the rest of the day. It just came like a thief in the night. Mm-hmm. It was just such this unexpected blessing that fell out of the sky.
And by that time, people were lining up, and there was starting to form a line, and through the next couple hours of the day, and they stayed open late that night, I think they closed at 6, but they stayed open till 8 or 10, something like. And it's a holiday weekend before Christmas. They were great,
and all the workers were so happy to be there.
Everybody was so happy to be there.
Complained, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was just electric. I still can't believe it, taking pictures of everything, videoing everything. And then that night, we got home, and we lived in the Avenues, and we were just walking around South Temple. And I really, truly remember the ground felt different to me. The air felt different to me. And I can't explain it other than just knowing that for the first time in my life, that the state recognized me as an equal. And then 17 days later, that was taken away when the state continued to fight against gay and lesbian families and their children, and that went back and forth for a while until it was finally resolved with the district court in October. But it was an intense year of feeling that the state really after you, trying to destroy your family and your marriage.
During that 17-day period, Troy Williams, who is now the executive director of Equality Utah, organized a rally at the state capitol. And it was an experience of jubilation that mapped for me onto the experiences that I read about the Kirtland Temple. When it talks about the charisma of the saints in the early temple and about the spiritual manifestations, I felt as clearly as any type of transpersonal presence, the spirit of Harvey Milk, the essence, however you want to understand that, the guiding principles that he built his life on, that presence and energy was there that day. Troy even invoked it, and he said, people ask us all the time, who is going to be the next Harvey Milk? The truth is that he still is inspiring us. That day was for me as real of a spiritual experience as a temple dedication had been for me when I was an Orthodox faithful Latter-day Saint. that's the point that I would want to underscore and emphasize in all of this, that this was a period of spiritual ecstasy, in addition to the just emotional exuberance that was so intense during those weeks.
Can I share with Grandma?
Yeah, of course.
So the marriage happened on a Friday, and we went down to see my grandparents in Provo on that Monday, the 23rd, to do Christmas. My grandparents are very small town. They grew up in Fountain Green, Utah, if you know where that is. It's up in Nephi Canyon. If you blink, you pass it. Salt of the earth Mormons, temple workers for 15 years, every calling you can imagine, like TBM in every way, right? Like, they are my pillars of what Mormonism is, was, and can be again. And we went down on the 23rd to see them.
Just Joseph's Smith's birthday.
Happened to be. And I came out to my grandparents years ago. They knew Michael. They sent us Christmas presents and birthday presents. They knew all of that. But we had never had the marriage discussion. We had never had the political side of it. They loved and accepted me for who I was without question. There was not any struggle for them in that. So we get to my grandma's house in Provo. We open the door and I hear her shuffling down the hallway. She's like yay high and 80 years old. And she's like, on Friday, Aunt Kathy called and she told us to turn on the TV. And we saw that you were down there and that you and Michael went and got married. And she grabbed my hands and she looked me in the eye and she said, and we think that's so cool. And that just melted my heart. Like that is, and also tragic that my experience is the exception rather than the rule. That there were a lot of people who got married whose families were not thrilled about it, who didn't think it was so cool. But Mormonism has that within it to be that and to celebrate gay and lesbian people and to be accepting and inclusive. And I think that's kind of why I stay involved and long for that to return.
So when Lee Beckstead reached out to me earlier today and asked that we try and be as expressed his hope that this would be as healing and as respectful as possible. I told him that I would honestly do my best, because that's what I've always tried to do with Mormon stories, even though sometimes I haven't. But I feel like just getting into the specifics of the case took up a lot of time, and honestly, that took up so much time that we haven't been able to focus as much on the healing per se. So it's nearing time of trying to start to wrap up. Everybody here has been very patient. So I think
you guys have been wonderful.
So I just want to say, just kind of editorially, that I really do just want to say that our heart has really been in trying to come to truth and understanding of a perspective. And I know that that's going to come at the expense of others, including people here in this room, Dave Matheson, Ty and Danielle Mansfield, others, Jeff Benyon, who are going to feel maybe that this wasn't respectful or this was an attack. And I just want to say, number one, that isn't our intent. Number two, we hope that we've handled this respectfully. But number three, we want to invite you or others that you would like to come on Mormon Stories, or go on any program and conduct whatever interview you want, and I'll still release it. But please know that we did this out of a deeper love and desire for truth and health and well-being and healing for our LGBT brothers and sisters. And even though this is a difficult conversation, we want you to know that we love and respect you and want truth and healing to prevail in the end. So we want to explicitly, again, make that invitation. And then before we open the floor up to some questions or comments from them or others, I do want to end with this idea of healing. And Seth, I want to start with you, and then Michael will let you finish. There's people who were raised LDS who have left. There are people who have been through reparative therapy, others that haven't. If you guys had any lessons about healing and growth that you would like to leave, or any comments about reconciliation, whatever, I want to give you a final chance to kind of close with your thoughts or messages or recommendations to LGBT Mormon youth and adults out there who are either suffering from what they've been through or trying to figure out what they're about to go through. What wisdom can you leave with them? Seth, why don't you start? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think often that the first step for me, at least, is open dialogue. And I think we as Mormons have to be okay with having these difficult discussions and not foreclosing them before they begin by asserting that it's an attack, that it's anti-Mormon, that it's not fair. Or we need to take people at their word and listen to the experiences that they've had. I would say to LGBT Mormon youth and LGBT youth everywhere, you're perfect and good as you are. I'm sorry that we live in such a homophobic world that tells you otherwise. I know it's a struggle, but you are loved and valuable, and we need to talk about these issues openly and honestly.
And I would say that if you're any individual who has had an experience with patriarchy, with Mormonism, with, a Heavenly Father figure that's been abusive, traumatic, trying, degrading, negative in any way, but you're still feeling that intensity to connect spiritually to something beyond yourself, I would invite you to focus that prayer energy toward a Heavenly Mother, toward a divine feminine source. There's the children's song in the primary songbook that says, Heavenly Father, are you really there? It's really a simple switch to ask Heavenly Mother, are you really there? Do you hear and answer every child's prayer? And the refrain to that, is pray, she's there. Speak, she's listening. If prayer is something that is central to you still, I invite you to direct that toward a mother who you'll find there just as real as you found a father there at one point. And there's a tremendous amount of healing that can flow out of that.
So you're saying for you, praying to a Heavenly Mother has been a source of healing?
It's been a major source of healing, yeah. Just getting in touch with the divine feminine, to the many representations of the divine feminine. This is, if we have a show about the Religious Brain Project, this is a very intense and involved conversation, bridging the worlds of neuroscience, neurobiology, psychology, with the worlds of religion, of faith, of spirituality, the way that throughout culture and history and evolution, that different God representations have come forward, the purposes that they've served. All of that is very, very involved, but the simple distillation of it is that for me, that getting in touch with a divine feminine source, an object of worship and devotion, has been incredibly empowering and healing for me.
One of the findings from our study is that some of the decisions that are most associated with healthness and well-being include, sexual activity, but in a more profound sense, committed same-sex love and companionship. Has that been healing for either of you?
Tremendously. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of hard to say. My advice is that you go find an amazing kick-ass husband like I did, That's not really just generic counsel that you can kind of give. But being with this guy right here has brought so much completion into my life. I feel like he's my helpmeet, my Ezra-Kunedgo, my soulmate, my beloved. He fulfills the roles for me that I was taught that a companion is always supposed to bring that power and that force into your life. That's been enormously healing.
How about you, Seth?
I agree. He said it very well. I agree.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Ferguson and Seth Anderson. I want to thank everyone for their patience. And now I want to invite members of the audience to come up and no pressure. You won't be on the camera unless you want to be. I can get up and get out of my seat. But if you want, you guys can start a little line right here, whatever. Grab the microphone. Please, ask your questions for Seth and Michael. Or if you have experiences that mirror what's been talked about today, that's great. But we invite, if you've had different experiences or disagreements or feel like things are mischaracterized, we want to give you a space to at least start that conversation, inviting a more detailed conversation later. But just try and be concise, but we want to hear other perspectives, and we promise, I hope you guys will promise that you'll be dealt with respectfully.
Just two quick, silly comments to set up a serious question. You had alluded to earlier having people in your life close to you that expressed shock and outrage, albeit feigned or real, at your coming out. And I wanted to tell you, as someone who's known you since you were younger than 8...
Jeff was my neighbor growing up in Virginia, my next door neighbor.
That you did not surprise the next door neighbors. We had known for a very, very long time, and we have joked about this many times, and I hate to tell a stereotypical story, but I have a younger brother the exact same age as Michael. They both signed up for ice skating lessons. My brother went into ice hockey. Michael went into figure skating. And that kind of sealed the deal for us, and we knew that there was no turning back. I say those silly stories just to remind you, and I've told you a million times, I'll tell you a million more times, that we knew, I mean, there was no question in our minds that you were a gay child prior to the age of 8. There was nothing in your life that you were going to do that was going to change that course. So my question is not how you envision your family relationships over the next 10, 20 years realistically, but how would you like them to be? Best case scenario, in a world of your own that you could create going forward, what does the relationship look like with your mom, with your dad, with your siblings, and with your extended family?
Wow, I like the questions where I get to design my own fantasy outcome. My fantasy outcome is that they all start praying to Heavenly Mother, get a revelation that same-sex marriage is a legitimate spiritual path, and celebrate the companionship that I have with my husband. That's a fantasy outcome.
That hasn't happened?
Not yet.
Okay. Did you have an answer, Seth?
So my family future?
Yeah. The fantasy outcome.
I kind of do. No, I like I said, it's sad to me that my life's the exception, not the rule. My family's great. My parents are wonderful. They love Michael. They ask about him all the time, and my sisters love him. They refer to him as their brother. The church sexuality thing is just not an issue for them.
It's wonderful. Okay.
I'm one of those people that went through Evergreen back in the early 90s, 91, well, 92, somewhere around there. And I can tell you unequivocally from my standpoint, it was incredibly damaging. I walked away, I didn't even have the depth of experience that you did, but I walked away feeling like a poison had been put into my soul. And it was really bad. I was one of the 40% of the people that it was a really damaging experience. So that's all I wanted to say. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
It's shame is the very core of these experiences. And so, yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned specifically that North Star had sexually abused you. I could imagine...
Not North Star.
Oh, maybe I misheard it. Oh, okay, because I was going to say a TBM person listening to the program would say you didn't specify anything, so I guess I misheard. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
Someone who is advertising themselves as a clinically trained professional.
Not associated with North Star.
That's right.
I'll ask a different question then.
But thank you for bringing that up so we could clarify that.
Yeah, if I misunderstood, maybe someone else might have. When a person goes in for a recommend with the bishop or whatever, and there's a lot of women that have talked about when there's been a sexual transgression that the bishop asks very probing questions and very voyeuristic. I was wondering, are there people in the North Star or in the Green other program where you felt they were totally straight, they said they were straight and everything, but you got a feeling that they were voyeuristically experiencing some of the things by asking about what your experience was? Did you ever feel there was voyeurism from a very straight person about almost second living through your experiences sexually?
That is an experience that I had on, private dialogue specifically with a bishop who was asking levels of details of questions that felt odd. It felt like there's something going on here. And again, like, I can only speak to my side of the experience, but that it did feel, like you said, voyeuristic, where it was almost like this feeding off of the sexual details. That I have had experiences, and specifically it was in the context with a bishop where there was that dynamic.
So this trial was so far-reaching. It seems like, as you guys move forward, that a lot of these programs are going to be outlawed and shown as fraud. Do you think that in that process, the LDS Church will have any liability, and to what level of liability do you think they will have, if so?
Is Sam still on the phone?
Yes, absolutely.
That's a really good question. Just because I'm not an attorney and trained in the legalities of the case, is it cool if we
Ask Sam?
patch
Yeah.
in?
If Sam wants to answer it.
Sam is, just to understand, Sam is one of the attorneys from the JONAH case, and just because it is still, active litigation, it was important for him to be a participant. So go for it, Sam.
Sam right there.
Okay, go ahead and start now, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, our case wasn't against a religious organization, it wasn't against religious practices, and so there's no way to really analogize our case to liability from the Mormon Church, as far as I can see.
So to paraphrase what Sam was saying here, is he said that that's pretty far removed from the JONAH case in the sense that it was not a religious organization engaging in religious practices, and so it's hard to analogize.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, but do it through the microphone.
So I get that your trial maybe didn't address that specifically, but in your experience and in your experience with the other people who went through conversion therapy, did the LDS Church, do you feel they have any liability?
These are really good questions, and they're hard questions. Certainly one thing that has to happen is better education and better training on the part of appropriate responses, in addition to having, again, trained, licensed therapists who can address the conflicts that typically arise, between conflicts of faith and sexuality, who bishops can refer to. There's a wonderful organization that's growing called the Mormon Mental Health Association. And they're taking a very, very difficult intersection of topics and trying to navigate it in a way that takes into account the best of psychological science, sociological science, biological sciences, and create a platform to work from that is different from the referrals that have been traditionally given by bishops. I know that's not the direct answer to your question, but one of the things that definitely needs to happen is better information and training.
Other questions or comments for Michael and Seth? Or perspectives, alternative perspectives?
Well, guys, I had to chuckle because Michael, with your experience with musical theater and my background's in dance,
there you go.
You know that some of these therapies they were doing at those camps have the basis in improvisation. And those were the very things that, as a dancer, enabled me to come to understand myself as a gay man and to fully accept myself. The fact that the lived experience with my body, as I learned to be a dancer and had the training for that, told me I was just fine as I was. And it was sort of amusing for me to hear the improvisational aspects of that journey they went through in the journey through manhood.
Yeah. And again, I think that a lot of people comment on that because they're like, oh, I did these types of things. Again, the examples come up several times, but I did these things with the radical fairies. That some of these same behaviors have been used in the context of deepening one's gayness. And so again, there is, I think, that glaring irony that leaves a lot of questions for people.
And I'll just say, just briefly, that one of the really important findings from the study that we did with Dr. Bradshaw and Renee Gallagher and others It turns out that the people who engaged in attempts to change their sexual orientation, a percentage of them did report benefit. I don't remember the exact percentage, but a certain percentage did report benefit. When we asked what type of benefit they most often experienced, one of the most common themes that was reported back was one of self-acceptance. So they would go to the psychotherapist to try and change. They would go to the Journey into Manhood retreat or pray to Heavenly Father, hoping that they would change. But the outcome was that in spite of what their original intent was going in to their attempt at change, they ultimately realized, you know what, I need to just accept who I am. And so even though they didn't get their originally desired outcome, that ended up being a positive outcome of attempting to change. So Brian, I think that reflects a little bit of your theme of self-acceptance. That's reflected in the data that we have. So it's an important theme. Any other comments or feedback? Excellent.
Just a comment on what was just said. With that comment about self-acceptance, you've finally begun to talk about what Journey into Manhood is really about.
Do you want to elaborate? Or?
No, another time, another venue.
Okay, can I say your name? Or?
David Matheson, a co-creator of Journey into Manhood and co-creator of Journey Beyond.
We want to thank David for his courage in coming and being willing to share. So I hope that Dave Matheson or Ty or others can elaborate on that. And again, the idea is that Journey into Manhood helps lead to self-acceptance, and I would love to learn more.
Michael and Seth, wonderful job tonight. Thank you. Question I had, Jeff and I, my husband, ran into a little bit of a conundrum that we weren't expecting. We read through a lot of the trial, and we also saw the show, what was it, My Husband's Not Gay, with Jem Bunyan, and we were both so outraged by it because it seemed so obvious that they were looking for victims to abuse sexually in a lot of cases. And so my husband, who's a very good writer, started to write a letter to the editor, to the Salt Lake Tribune.
Real quick, what do you mean by looking to abuse?
They're trying to solicit unexpecting, innocent young gay people into these groups that can be molested further down the line. And whether it's all the way to a complete sexual orgasm or not, I don't know, that there's a certain amount of levels of would you say that I'm misrepresenting that?
No, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that you view sort of naked holding, for example, as kind of an abusive practice.
Okay, I will claim that as my view. I saw
okay.
some of these views
I just wanted to understand.
as a way almost...
That you see it as a grooming process.
Yes. Okay. And I should add, Michael's so beautiful the way he expresses things. But what I'm getting at is we ran into this conundrum as he started writing this letter. He realized that there are a lot of gay people in Mormonism who have chosen to go to the heterosexual normative path, have married, and maybe some of these practices that we are outraged about are the only escape valve they have in their life. And I'm just going to ask you that. Does it serve that level in any kind of a healthy way? Do some of these practices that we look at as outrageous that maybe obviously don't change sexual orientation, but they maybe provide some way to cope with the life that they're trapped in, so to speak? Would you say that it could offer that service?
I would say that, if you're in a situation where you're repressing your fundamental sexual nature and you have these opportunities to engage in touch, in nudity, in intimacy, certainly you can understand why these guys go back over and over and over, and that after they go on them, that they go back as counselors. It's one of the reasons why the Journey Beyond program, that the counselor to participant ratio is about 3-to-1. Like, what the heck do you need 3 counselors for standing around watching somebody dance naked? And I think that it begs that exact question, like, is this a sublimated outlet for sexual gratification? It begs that question. So the question is, could it help somebody within Mormonism? I feel like it's a ticking time bomb.
For some.
I think that again, I put it in terms of if this were a heterosexual person who is approaching their bishop and having a frank conversation about behaviors and activities that they were participating in, it would be nuclear.
So if somehow men and women were having young boys and girls who were heterosexual do naked holding or other types of, rituals that involved naked baptism or, birthing rituals or developmental rituals, that in a heterosexual context, that would be explosive, you're saying?
It would totally be explosive.
And probably grounds for excommunication or...
For some type of... It would not go over well. And that's the point that I guess that I'm making, is that given the realities of the culture in which these programs operate, they continue to drive an incongruous lifestyle where if there were transparency, it would not be seen as a compatible path of choices with the norms that are being prescribed by the church. And I think that creates a lot of conflict.
So speaking as a former Mormon out gay father, who is also a clinical social worker and a therapist, we are, from a familial or religious or political standpoint, anytime we're seeing homosexuality as inferior to heterosexuality, we're already creating really dangerous places for people to operate in. We're saying you need to change. We're saying this is the standard by which you should live and anything else is substandard. So any effort to try to change, we're already admitting within ourselves that there's something wrong that needs to be amended. And when we grow up with that kind of baggage, it creates really long-term damage. So even for people who choose to enter a heterosexual marriage if they're gay, or who choose to live celibate, or who choose to try to seek to change, or maybe I can set things aside and learn to live in another way, you're automatically creating a rift within yourself saying, I am inferior because I am this. And that creates long-term damage in essence. So I just wanted to take a big picture view of that because it creates very painful damage. I saw it with myself and I saw it with my clients.
Thank you for bringing that up. There's definitely an insidious trauma in addition to the acute trauma that is experienced.
I think in the literature they call this internalized homonegativity, right? As kind of, the negative outcome of such beliefs.
That it's a pattern, yeah.
I just want to kind of address what you said. I have someone I'm close to in my life who was told by a general authority that he was now cured of being gay and he was never to talk about it again. He got married, he has children. His wife found out after they were married. I look at the impact on him, who says every day is a lie, and on his wife, and on their children. It is completely not okay to tell someone that they cannot be sexually attracted to who they are, and to take that away from their lives, to take it away from their wives and their children, and to model that. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you for sharing that. If I could respond with one of my experiences that mirrors something similar to that, it was a very destructive experience for me under the hands of a stake president who laid his hands on my head and in a blessing said, "You're not gay. Satan has worked very hard to trick you into thinking that you're attracted to men, but you're not gay." And that messed up my mind, because I put so much belief and sincere faith in those words, believing that they were coming from revelation. And it invalidates on a deep, profound level who you are as a person to hear those types of words and that type of counsel. And it's something that perpetuates a lot of harm unnecessarily.
Any final questions or comments? Okay, well, once again, let's give Michael and Seth a round of applause.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for coming today. I think this has been an important beginning to a conversation. I hope that we can have more conversations. Again, I invite participants in Evergreen, participants in North Star, other Journey into Manhood who have more positive or affirming sort of stories to tell, or want to set the record straight, tell us we're wrong, tell us we've lied or mischaracterized, want to invite whoever to come forward, do an interview with someone else or with me, and we'll give you a chance to share your side of the story, because that's important to us. To close, thanks to all of you who support Mormon Stories. Please go to mormonstories.org if you want to have a conversation with Seth or Michael or anyone else who wants to participate. We'll have documents. We'll have the video excerpt up there. We'll have documents to the transcript. There are other documents that Michael's willing to share, that he shared in court, that sort of give a sense for the evidence that he brings when he makes these claims. And we just want to encourage you to keep supporting Mormon Stories, and thank everyone for listening, and we hope to tune in again soon for more cool stuff. So thanks very much, and thanks again to all of you. Please drive safely on your way home. Take care. Thank you for joining us today on Mormon Stories Podcast. To discuss this podcast with others, please check us out at mormonstories.org. To join one of our 80-plus support communities across the globe, click on the Support Communities tab at mormonstories.org. To keep this podcast alive, please consider a tax-deductible donation today by becoming a monthly subscriber at mormonstories.org. Audio and video for this podcast were provided by Richard Holdman. A big thanks to the Saber Rattlers for providing the music for today's episode. The Mormon Stories logo was generously donated by StudioCase.com.
Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy